there is the situation which I come across a lot, which is that somebody applies to a council and they say, oh, you've made a homeless application. Here's a list of the things we need before we can deal with your application. And to me, that is absolutely unlawful, because they should be saying, here's a list of the things we need while we deal with your application. Can you help us get these things? If you can't, let us know, we'll talk about it. But meanwhile, for instance, if you need temporary accommodation, we'll get on with providing that. But what they're doing is often saying, don't bother talking to us until you've come back with a sort of folder full of things.
So I mean, it's funny you say that, because again, one case I'm working with at the moment is with Northants Council, and their stage 2 response was literally, our usual procedure is to make inquiries and satisfy ourselves that you're definitely homeless before we'll take an application. And that was the stage 2 response. And I was like, again, you that's not going to hold water with the LJ when they look at that, because you're admitting very blatantly that you're not following the law. So I mean, I guess some councils just seem to think that that's okay.
It is, and it goes back to the Yabari point, which is that how many inquiries do you have to make in order to have reason to believe? I mean, really, you just to say, hello, how can I help you? And once you've had the answers to those questions, you've got reason to believe. So I think any council that responds like that is describing an unlawful process. The other thing is that I think that in practical terms, where the local authority do ask for things like, a doctor's report is quite a hard thing to get, because GP surgeries are sort of fairly impenetrable places for many people, and the doctors can charge for providing reports, and they will sometimes refuse to provide them to people. I mean, it's like 50 quid or something, so that they know that the council will pay. But I think that what I would always advise somebody, that if the council have asked for stuff, I would say, well, I'll write back to them if they're refusing to do anything while it's coming in. But I would then say to the client, well, is there any reason why you can't sort of go and see your GP and ask for a report? And, at least you're cooperating. But then,
as an aside, just on that point, Will, something that's so I did a video for it recently. My colleague Shannon was like, she said, the NHS app is brilliant for. I mean, you're not going to get a specific doctor's report about something, because you'd have to ask them to do that. But you can basically get your full medical records at touch of a button, and it will answer a lot of questions. Certainly, it will give a council reasons to believe that you might be in priority need, for example, just simply because of the medication you might be taking or something, and you can get proof of that. Because I've had housing options officers, again, just the not good ones. They'll kind of say, well, the person will say, well, olanzapine, it's an antipsychotic, and they say, well, prove it, where show me your medication box or whatever. And actually, which you might not have with you, but if you've got the NHS app, you can say, yeah, here it is. And that's not the way it should be done. But, pragmatically speaking, if you can get that information simply, then why not? So,
could you say a bit more about the NHS app? Because something...
it's brilliant. It's honestly, so Shannon was showing me what you can get. So I ain't got a smartphone, so I don't know how it works. But you got a smartphone, you download the app. You have to go to the surgery to speak to the receptionist to activate it, but apparently it's straightforward. And then literally you've got medication history, in reports from hospital about any specialties. So if you're seeing the doctor for something, they will have everything, and you've got it on your phone. You can screenshot it. So as I say, it's not obviously going to have something on there specifically about, what's my opinion about what's going to happen to this person if they become homeless. Therefore show they're in priority need or not. But you'd be able to demonstrate a lot of other stuff just with a click of a button. So, I was really impressed by it. I think you can get everything that everything the doctor's got on you, basically. Just it's all pretty well laid out as well. So
good, because it might be a quicker way. Because I have found that since the Data Protection Act came in, GP surgeries have been pretty good at sending me their medical records within a month of being asked to do so. But as you say, the problem is the medical records. I mean, I spent this Sunday. I'd had to put work at the weekend. I had to read through 500 pages of medical records. No, sorry, it was 500 pages of a housing file and then 300 pages of medical records. But most of the medical records were just standardized things about checkups, and you really have to sort of study it. But it'd be nice to know I could get them through the app and encourage people to do that.
Yeah.
But the other thing on this subject is just what to do if the person does have mental health problems, because you may get counsel saying, "Oh, well, you don't have capacity." I had this when I was ringing up Lewisham during the end of the lockdown and trying to. Well, I was quite interested to see how the telephone gateway sort of thing worked. And as soon as I said that this was an elderly person who had difficulty managing his affairs, they were saying, "Oh, he hasn't got capacity, so that's the end, game over." And I said, "No, I didn't say he doesn't have capacity. I said he has difficulty." But God knows how somebody on their own would have coped with that. I mean, that would have just been it.
Well, so I've done training to counsellors and mental health practitioner teams who that's the standard thing. As soon as mental health diagnosis is mentioned, we've done video on it before, haven't we? In terms of that kind of immediately they jump to the conclusion that you don't have capacity. And the fact that if you look in chapter 10 of the Code of Guidance, and it talks about struggling to manage your affairs is a reason why you might not be intentionally homeless, is pretty much straightforward proof that you can manage to struggle. You can struggle to manage your affairs and still make a homeless application, because otherwise, why would it be in the Code of Guidance at all? So, yeah.
So then the question would be, if the person, let's just say for the sake of argument that the person clearly does lack capacity, then obviously that's only the starting point of the discharging the duty under the Care Act, because we're not saying, "Oh, they lack capacity because they're mentally ill, so sorry, they'll have to sleep on the street." But they then have to be assessed by social services and possibly accommodated under the Care Act. But I mean, my experience in the last few years is, if GP surgeries are difficult to engage with, adult social services is almost sort of non-existent. I mean, I'm only saying that because I deal with a lot of bad cases, and I know there's a lot of social workers out there working hard, but it is so difficult.
There was a case I put in the Facebook group, the Homelessness Best Practice Facebook group, and it was an interesting one for a number of reasons. And this is actually the one where they're talking about not somebody wasn't cooperating, but the council specifically were called up on the fact that they hadn't accepted. They had reasons to believe the person might have care and support needs, and they hadn't done a Section 9 Care Act assessment, and there was some safeguarding involved as well. So the LGO not only kind of pulled them up on the fact that they hadn't followed the housing law stuff properly, they also, by implication, hadn't followed the Care Act stuff. And that's the first time I noticed it. Now, the one thing that was interesting there was that the person had asked for a Care Act assessment, which is kind of, I would argue that you shouldn't have to ask for a Care Act assessment looking at the wording of the Care Act. But
you don't, do you? If it appears to somebody, that's what.
Yeah, that's so really a housing officer should be really kind of open to the idea that this person may have care and support needs. Therefore, we need to make sure a Section 9 of the Care Act is discharged. But that's another video, isn't it?
That is another video. Yeah, that's right.